I'd like to give you some positive news on the economy, but there isn't any. 75% almost of all the money we are borrowing is going on interest payments for our existing debt because they had backbenchers that were economically illiterate, pushing them to do more left wing things. And if they didn't, then they would bring the government down.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest, and it's hard to keep him off the channel. It's that press and journalist. How you doing, Ash?
Yeah, I'm really good, Nick. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Um, when when I want to talk about finance, it's usually you and Silver Fox I go to because you both understand economics more than me. Because not all of us can be experts on everything, so we need to listen to people who know more than us on certain topics. I'm beginning to, well, first of all, there's lots of people out there, economists, people in politics who know more than me, saying we're in dire straits. The interest we're paying on our loans as a country is at a 29-year high. We could be going to the IMF for a bailout. But then this last few weeks, I've started seeing one or two people popping up going, this is rubbish. And it's like, oh, that took me back a little bit. It's like, is it rubbish? And they've been saying things like, yeah, things aren't going well, but we could go on like this for decades and decades without crashing. They're saying that the next budget, which is in the autumn, Rachel Reeves will be doing things that will improve the economy. She's not going to increase taxes. And I'm thinking, is this wishful thinking? Because lots of other people, I mean, 90% to 10%, the 90% is saying we're in dire straits and it looks like a collapse could be coming. What do you think?
The only people I've seen saying the opposite are people that appear on the BBC or ITV trying to make the country think that everything's going okay for their mates in the Labour Party, especially when if you see a programme like Good Morning Britain, which I do not watch, but if it's on somewhere when I'm there, it's literally an ex-Labour MP and Labour supporting people like Susanna Reid and the rest of them actually doing the interviews. It's pathetically it's so shamelessly biased that you've actually got, for example, Ed Balls interviews his own wife about government policy. So let's take no lessons on impartiality from those people. The economy is in such dire straits; it's unreal. We are now at GDP, the gross domestic product of the country. In other words, the gross profit of this country. Before we go through it, before we spend anything, we are now debt to GDP is 96% in this country. But what's more worrying is other countries are in just as bad a state, if not worse, than what we are. So as soon as people started talking about the IMF bailout, what happened within the last 10 days is the French, whose government is now on the verge of collapse and will collapse next week, they are now on the verge of asking for an IMF bailout because their debt to GDP is worse than ours. Theirs is 113% of their GDP. So the French have come out and said, whoa, 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 Britain, we might need this IMF bailout. And where does IMF money come from? If we do need a bailout, who are the biggest funders of the IMF? You couldn't make it up. We are one of them.
I've got no idea.
Yeah, we're one of them.
We're one of them.
We're one of them. And we could be asking for a bailout from the very people that we give money to. So you've got the United States, unsurprisingly, at the top. You've got Japan, China, Germany, France, UK, Italy, India, Russia, and Brazil. They're your top 10 funders of the IMF. Two of those countries now are considering asking for my IMF bailouts in France and ourselves because we're in such financial shit. You've got, like you just said, the gilt is now, the 30-year gilt is at over 5.7 and rising since Starmer did his reshuffle because the markets can see that Reeves has lost all authority and she looks very vulnerable and isolated now. You've got, what was I going to say then? Sorry, right. So the only other country in Europe that will be in any fit state to donate more money to the IMF to help bail France or Britain out would be Germany. But guess where Germany will get its money from? German banks hold some of the biggest stocks of French and British debt. So they would literally have to call in debt from us and France to then give that money to the IMF to then for then the IMF to turn around and say, right, we'll give it back to these again, and then we're back in debt with them in the first place. This is the situation we're in. 75% almost of all the money we are borrowing is going on interest payments for our existing debt. 140 billion borrowed in the tax year 24 to 25. 105 billion of that went on paying the interest on our debts, not even paying the debt off, just paying the interest on our debts. And every week that, in fact, not even every week at the moment, every day that passes, that gilt rate is rising, and that is the interest that we are paying on government borrowing, and that is going up all the time. So the cost of borrowing is rising all the time, and the Bank of England has screwed us because they've done everything they can to try and help Labour out, which I kind of get, but they didn't do the same for Liz Truss. So they've tried to help Reeves out by lowering interest rates continuously, despite people around Andrew Bailey saying you're making the wrong decision here, and he's done it anyway, the Governor of Bank of England. So now they thought it might give some growth, but it hasn't, because it doesn't free up any money, because people are paying more taxes now than they've ever paid. Food inflation's at about 6%. Inflation itself is at what, 3.8 now, expected to go well over 4 the next time the inflation figures come out. I'd like to give you some positive news on the economy, but there isn't any. It's basically a game of who collapses first, us or France, to get the IMF bailout.
Let me ask you this, because so I want to make it real for people, because sometimes we don't get it, especially me. So if we go to the IMF for a bailout, that sounds great. They're going to give us a load of money, we pay our debts off, and then we pay them back. Well, that doesn't sound bad. What are they? But the question is this, Ash: what is the IMF going to demand from us to give us the bailout? What are they going to? They're not going to give a basket case money without demanding they change their ways. What are those ways they're going to demand that we change?
Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. But when you've got someone by the balls, the hearts and minds follow, don't they? Was it Reagan who said that, or someone like that? I can't think who said that now. Anyway, yeah. So they could literally demand anything they want, because if you have to go, if you're in such financial dire straits where you have to go to the IMF for a bailout, then let's face it, they can literally demand of you whatever they damn well please. So they could say to us, right, we'll give you this bailout, but you have to rejoin the EU. You have to adopt the euro. I'm just giving that as an example. That's what they could say.
We saw what they did to Greece.
Exactly.
No, they went to Greece and they went, you've got to sell off all your assets. And it was a fire sale. They sold off all the ports, they sold this off, they reduced the pensions, they gutted departments, because the IMF's job isn't to improve the country. The IMF's job is to ensure the money they give gets repaid. So that all they care about is making sure that economy is in a better position to start paying back the IMF. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the poverty. It's all financial decisions. And Greece has never recovered over the last 10 years from what the IMF did to Greece.
Greece is still a mess. You've got huge youth unemployment. You've got an aging population, and anybody that is young enough, say in their early 20s or something, to actually go out there and make a new life for themselves, they're leaving Greece to do it. They're not staying inside Greece. I know a few Greek people. They will tell you the only jobs people are after inside Greece now is public sector jobs, because the rest of them don't pay anything. So, and you've got such political upheaval. You've got quite a prominent communist party there that likes to march up and down the streets. You've got other parties around Greece all contesting with each other. The place is a basket case, and believe it or not, their gilts are lower than ours. It actually costs us more. It actually costs us more to borrow money than it does Greece. But the place is a mess, and you don't recover from an IMF bailout. And if you do, it takes you a long time to do so. And don't forget that, I mean, as much as I'd love to see people kicked out of office like Starmer and the rest, it wouldn't be good for anybody, because that will then cause political upheaval as well. And nothing would get done. You'd have all them lot sat in Parliament shouting and screaming at each other, crying for a general election. Doesn't necessarily mean you get one. You might end up with an IMF bailout, and these people might stay in office. When Callaghan and Healy went for the bailout in 76, was it? They stayed in office until 79 afterwards. But there's so many parallels with what they did to what's happening now. You've only got to read what Callaghan said in his memoirs. And was it not John Healy? Was it Dennis Healy wrote it?
Dennis Healy.
Yeah, so you've only got to read what they said in their memoirs about why they had to do this because they had backbenchers that were economically illiterate, pushing them to do more left-wing things. And if they didn't, then they would bring the government down. That's exactly what we've just seen with this lot when they tried to cut some money off the welfare budget. But the difference is with this lot, at least Callaghan and that understood economics. We've now got a front bench and a back bench in government. None of them seem to understand economics at all, and one of them reckons she was an economist.
And it's even worse than that. I want the people to understand what happens if we go to a bailout and the IMF then dictate our policies. It isn't just that the country's poorer, it's the knock-on effect. Interest rates will go through the roof. Inflation will go through the roof. There'll be mass job losses overnight in the public sector. Businesses will stop investing. Foreign businesses will stop investing money in the UK because they don't know what's going on. Businesses that wanted to open a new plant or take more new staff on will say, we're not doing that. We don't know what's going on. There'll be no more wage rises because business will go, we're not, it will be, it's not just a government who'll be punished. Every single person in the country will be punished.
So that everyone, all right, and so to put it into simple terms for people who don't understand, I know I can go off on one about this, and people don't always understand it, but to put it into simple terms, imagine you personally ran out of money and you had to go insolvent and you had to go bankrupt personally. That's basically what an IMF bailout is, and you're then at their beck and call. What can't you do when you've gone bankrupt? You basically can't do anything for 10, is it 10 years, or has it been shortened now? It used to be 10 years, it might be 5 now, but you can't even what you can't get any credit whatsoever. You can't get a phone contract. You can't get a loan. You can't get an overdraft. You can't do anything basically for those years that you are insolvent. So as long as you're paying the IMF back, this country's basically insolvent. And like you said, who's going to invest in this country then? Will there be any jobs? Will there be any pay rises? Will there be any prospects? No. And then you end up with a brain drain. Something that's sort of happening at the moment anyway. Younger people are leaving. According to the IMF, this is what they would demand. They demand that a country agrees to enact economic reforms to address the root causes of its financial crisis, which is pretty broad, isn't it? In other words, you'll dance to their tune, and when you dance with the devil, you wait for the tune to stop. So you're stuck with them until they damn well say so, until you've paid all that money back. And yes, it might save us in the short term, but God, in the long term, the consequences are unthinkable of what it would do to this country. I wasn't alive in '76, and I don't know what the immediate consequences really were of the IMF bailout. I know the country didn't do very well, of course, but maybe you can shed some more light on what actually happened to this country after the bailout.
Well, the late 70s was horrendous. I remember growing up in a house with candles everywhere because we had nothing but electricity strikes because the workers had been so used to having socialist governments that always caved in with pay demands that suddenly, because of the IMF, there was no more increases in wages. Even if you went on strike, you weren't getting it because there was no money and they weren't allowed to do it. So we had strikes every day, bodies not being buried. And all that led to Thatcher. So when Thatcher came in '79, her economy was crap for the first 3 years. And that was all because she was trying to solve the problems of the decade before. And then when her policies started kicking in the early to mid '80s, that's when we got the boom. But it was horrendous. I remember 3-4 million people unemployed. I remember people whose houses got repossessed, and even the people who repossessed them couldn't sell them. Where I lived in East Manchester, I bought a cheap house in East Manchester, and at the time in the '80s, you could buy a whole street of terraced houses for £5,000 because you couldn't give them away. You couldn't get a mortgage on them. Nobody could afford houses. And you were giving, I remember some landlord was doing deals, buy one house, get one free. And you look at our housing market now, it's hard to believe that went on because now every house is worth a fortune now. That's how bad the country was.
But if you look, there's parallels to what you just said. That's what's going on now. The property market in this country has stalled because these people, who ironically are trying to dodge stamp duty themselves by the looks of it, put up stamp duty. They're buying up streets of houses to house illegal immigrants in, creating the shortage of houses. So supply and demand, houses are going up anyway. And if you do have a house to sell, people aren't buying them because they're going to have to pay such stupid rates on things like stamp duty that they can't afford to do it. So you've actually got some of these new homes that are being built that are just sitting empty. Nobody can afford to move, even if you can scrape together the deposit for your new home or your first home, whatever it may be. They've took away all of the what's the word I'm looking for? Concessions that you used to get as being a first time buyer. That's all been taken away now. So you're actually paying more. So even if you can get the deposit together, you still can't afford the stamp duty after that anyway to get your new home. You know, we're in such a doom loop when it comes to the finances of this country. And we are, it sounds and looks just like you've described. Maybe not as extreme at the moment, but there's certainly, you've got your unions getting more powerful now because Labour are allowing them to, holding the country to ransom. Birmingham have just announced the bin men are on strike till March 2026 at the earliest. So, there's so many parallels to this. And you've got, as far as your blackouts goes with the candles and stuff like, you remember, what's to say that can't happen this winter with Mad Ed's net zero policies? We are paying Norway £40 billion a year, and they're actually planning to increase that to import North Sea oil and gas that sat on our doorstep. They drill from the same oil fields we should be drilling from. And then Starmer's lauding this new deal he's done with Norway, where we're going to build some Type 26 frigates for them. A deal worth 10 billion quid. I'm like, yeah, all right, it's 10 billion quid. Yes, it'll sustain some jobs, fine. But Norway are obviously going to give us that sweet deal because we're paying them 5 times that pretty much, or we will be by the end of this winter, just for the energy that we should be drilling ourselves. There's no profit here. There's no benefit to Britain here. What if you get 10 billion off somebody, but you're paying them 50, it doesn't take a genius to work out. It's minus 40 billion. But Starmer and these idiots see that as a win. They think, oh, look at this, look what we've done. Yeah, but how much are we losing?
Crazy. No, I mean, like I say, North Sea oil, most of North Sea oil is ours. It's on our doorstep. We have the rights to it. We just don't let anybody drill there. So we buy the oil from over the border in the North Sea, which the Norwegians own. It's crazy. Before we go, what should people be looking out for? What's the next warning? What's going to happen? Is it going to be interest rates? Is it going to be blackouts? Well, what should we be looking at that's going to make us realize that a financial crash is coming? Or is it going to be a financial crash?
Look out for the 30-year gilts. All you got to do is go online. It's not a complicated thing. All you got to do is go online and check out the 10-year and 30-year gilts. That is how much it's costing the government to borrow over a 10-year or a 30-year period. And as long as that keeps rising, the definition is over 4.8%, you're in economic trouble. We're at 5.7 for the 30-year gilt. Look out for that because that's increasing the debt all the time. Look out for the budget, which has now been announced for November the 26th. That is too late. You cannot wait that short before Christmas to impose more and more taxes on people and on businesses in the middle of the golden quarter when people should be out there spending countless amounts of money in different shops, in toy shops, buying presents for their wives, girlfriends, kids, spending money in hospitality, on works, Christmas parties, etc. They're waiting as long as they can, not because they've got a plan, Nick, but they're waiting as long as they can because they're praying that some miracle falls from the heavens to save their arses before they have to clobber this country all over again. That budget is going to be a disaster. That's what we've got to watch out. That's the next big fiscal event. But as long as the cost of borrowing keeps going up, we are in serious, serious trouble. And the IMF, it might not happen this year, but next year is a big possibility.
Yeah, I think they've pushed the budget to the end of November because I think they want the fallout from that to be squashed by Christmas, by everybody too busy for Christmas, having holidays, spending. And I think they're hoping the Christmas silly season will quash some of the bad news that's going to come out of the budget.
Not if people don't go out and spend it, won't.
Well, and that's the risk.
Because then all the shops are going to say, and all the pubs are going to say, and all the restaurants, nightclubs, whatever, they're going to say, nobody came. So they're all going to shut down. They're all going to lay people off. And then what? You've got even more people on the unemployment lists. Brilliant.
Yeah, all taking benefits, which we're entitled to, which then increases our debt, which increases how much we pay. We've got less taxes coming in. It's like this is just one of those, what do they call it, a death cycle. It's a death cycle.
It is a death cycle. And if the Bank of England are stupid enough to lower interest rates again, we'll be in even more trouble. Don't be surprised if you don't see them put them up, which will be a disaster.
Who knows with the Bank of England? It's become a political arm and it doesn't seem to do what it should be doing. Ash, it's complicated. It's a complicated topic, but people will know when it's going wrong, when there's no pay rises, when food in the shop's too expensive, when there's strikes, and their life is becoming dire. They'll understand economics then.
The best way for people to look, if you want to know how much things are going up by, the most common thing that we all do, your weekly shop. Go and do your weekly shop. We all buy pretty much the same thing every time we go anyway. See how much it changes. Keep your receipts, have a look, and tell me that things aren't getting more expensive. That's the best way to check it.
Yeah, and we all know, even I can tell by going to the shops, things are going up all the time. Ash, thanks so much again for the depressing news. One of these days, I'm going to have you on for some good news. But today wasn't that day. It was a depressing day. Thank you for depressing me and my audience. And I'll catch you again soon.
Yeah, cheers, Nick. Thanks a lot.